So there's this nickname that follows Bernard Arnault around and I keep coming back to it.
Because the story of how he got the first one, Dior, or rather the company that owned it, is a proper thriller. It's a boardroom fight dressed in a beautiful suit. I'm Felix Wagner, and I have to tell you, I once spent an afternoon in a Louis Vuitton archive room in Paris, white gloves on, and the thing that struck me was how much of that world is a story about a story. The bag isn't leather, it's a narrative you can carry.
A narrative with a handle.
Exactly right.
And I'll be the one keeping us tethered to what's actually documented. Because a man like Arnault attracts legend the way a magnet attracts iron filings. Andre Dubois. I spent years reading annual reports for a living, which sounds like a punishment, and mostly was. But you learn that the interesting truth is usually in the footnotes, not the folklore.
And I'm Priya Nair. And I'll be honest with you both, I come into this a bit skeptical of one thing in particular. This idea that Arnault is some singular genius. Because every empire has a story where the founder is a visionary. And I've heard that song before. So I want to see whether it holds up.
That's a fair place to stand.
Oh, I'll take that bet.
We'll see. So let's actually start at the start. Who is he before he's the richest man in the world?
The origin is the part people forget, and it's the part I find most telling. Arnault does not come out of fashion. He comes out of construction. His family ran a building and public works firm in the north of France. He trained as an engineer, the École Polytechnique, which in France is about as elite as it gets.
An engineer! That's the detail I love. Everyone pictures a man who grew up sketching gowns, and instead you've got a fellow who understands load-bearing walls and... who understands concrete.
Nice save.
I caught myself, but it matters, that background, because he looks at a fashion house the way an engineer looks at a structure. What holds this up? Where's the stress? What can it actually bear?
And there's a story he's told over the years. I'll flag it as the kind of story a man tells about himself, so take it with some salt. About being in the back of a taxi in the United States in the 80s. He asked the driver if he knows who the president of France is. Driver has no idea, but he knows Christian Dior.
Oh, that's the whole thesis in one anecdote.
It is. A French name that means something everywhere. That's the asset he decided to go after.
And here's where it turns into the thriller. In the mid-80s, there's a French textile conglomerate, Boussac, that happens to own the house of Christian Dior, and it's in real trouble, bankrupt basically. The government's looking for someone to take it on and save the jobs.
Boussac and Friers. Yes, a big employer, a lot of workers, a lot of political sensitivity.
And in comes this relatively young man with family money and financial backing, and he says, I'll take it. And the pitch, the public pitch, is about saving a French industrial treasure. What actually happens is he keeps the crown jewel, which is Dior, and sells off an enormous amount of the rest.
So the rescue is really an acquisition wearing a rescue's coat.
That's the accusation, and it has teeth. There were significant job losses. Now, the counter-argument is that the thing was collapsing anyway, and without a buyer, the whole lot goes down. But he came out of it owning Dior, and that's the acorn.
That's the acorn from which the entire oak grows.
Okay, but Dior alone isn't the empire. How do you get from one house to, what is it now, 70-something brands?
Around 70. Spread across fashion, wine and spirits, watches, jewelry, perfume, retail. And the move that gets him there is it's a really clever, really ruthless piece of business. LVMH itself.
This is my favourite bit. So let me set it up. Louis Vuitton and Moet Hennessy, the champagne and cognac people, plus the luggage people, had merged in the late 80s. Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton. That's the LVMH. But the two sides of that marriage did not get along. The bosses were feuding.
A merger where the partners hate each other? Never heard of such a thing.
It happens more than you think.
And Arnault gets invited in. Invited by one faction as an ally against the other. And he comes in and he keeps quietly buying shares. And buying until one morning everyone looks up and realises the man they brought in to help one side has taken the whole thing for himself.
So he was invited to referee the fight and walked off with the belt.
With the belt, the ring and the arena.
And this is where Wolf in Cashmere really gets minted. Because it's the early 90s, there's a bruising legal and financial battle for control. And when the dust settles, he's got LVMH. It cements the reputation, the charm on the surface, the absolutely relentless calculation underneath.
See, this is the thing I keep chewing on though. Everything you've described so far is financial cleverness. Being early, being patient, being willing to be the bad guy in the room. That's not the same as understanding luxury. So I'm still waiting for the genius part, honestly.
That's the right challenge. And I'd say the money moves get him the buildings. What he does inside them is a separate skill.
And that's where I want to go next, because I think that's where you might start to wobble, Priya.
Come at me.
So here's the thing he understood that a pure money man wouldn't. A luxury brand runs on desire, and desire needs a face. It needs a creative genius people believe in. And the boldest thing he did was hand these 100-year-old French houses to young, sometimes shocking outsider designers.
The clearest case is Gian Galliano at Dior. British, theatrical, completely unafraid. Arnault put him in charge of the couture house in the mid-90s. Before that, he'd brought Galliano into Givenchy and then moved him up.
And then Givenchy goes to Alexander McQueen, this working-class kid from London, a tailor's precision and a punk's heart, doing shows that made people gasp and sometimes made them furious.
Hang on. So the construction engineer, the concrete man, he's the one taking the wild swings on the artists?
That's exactly the paradox, because he grasps something deep. Heritage without shock becomes a museum. Nobody desires a museum. You need the tension, the old name, the dangerous new voice, and the friction between them is the electricity.
And I'd add the number that makes it real. Marc Jacobs at Louis Vuitton, starting in the late 90s. Vuitton was luggage, beautiful, respectable, a bit sleepy. Jacobs turns it into a fashion house, the collaborations, the artists, the whole apparatus. And Vuitton becomes, by most estimates, one of the most valuable luxury brands on the planet. Not because the bag got better, because the story got louder.
Okay, that lands differently. Because that's not just buying a name and squeezing it. That's a bet, a real bet, that the way you make an old thing valuable is to make it slightly dangerous again.
Oh, there it is! I felt it! Did you feel that? She moved!
I moved a little. Sit down.
And the structure underneath it is the clever part for me. He built a portfolio. Some houses are enormous cash engines, Vuitton, the champagnes. That cash funds patience everywhere else. A smaller house can have a bad few years, can take a creative risk that flops because it's not carrying the whole building.
So the money brain and the creative brain aren't actually separate. The portfolio is what buys the artists the freedom to be reckless.
That's it precisely. The engineer built a machine for absorbing creative risk.
And you can only do that at scale. One house on its own, a flop can kill you. 70 houses, a flop's a Tuesday.
But this is where I want to slow us down, because it's not all triumph, is it? That creative tension machine, it has a dark side.
It does, and we should be square about it. John Galliano, the man who defined Dior for a generation, was fired in 2011 after an incident in a Paris bar. Anti-Semitic remarks that were recorded.
And it's brutal in a way, because the whole model depends on the designer being a kind of high-wire performer. You hire people for their intensity, their refusal to be safe, and then the intensity spills over the edge.
And Alexander McQueen, that ends in tragedy.
McQueen took his own life in 2010. He'd left the LVMH orbit by then. He had his own house backed by the rival group. But the broader picture, the pressure on these designers, the relentless calendar, collection after collection, that's a real conversation the industry has had to have.
The machine is beautiful from the outside. It asks an enormous amount from the humans inside it.
And I think that's important to hold, because we can get seduced by the empire story, the bags, the champagne, the taxi anecdote. There are people paying a cost in there.
Agreed. And to be fair to the record, Dior did move on, brought in new designers, kept thriving, which is almost the coolest part. The house is bigger than any one artist. That's by design.
The name outlives everyone. Christian Dior, the man, died in the 50s. The name Dior is immortal, and it doesn't need him. That's the whole logic of the thing.
Andre, you said something earlier about following the footnotes. So, follow the money for me here. Who actually gets rich off this and how?
Well, at the top, spectacularly, the Arnault family. There have been stretches where Bernard Arnault has been ranked the wealthiest person alive, ahead of the tech billionaires. And think about that. Not software, not oil, handbags and champagne.
Which should tell you something extraordinary about human beings. We will pay almost anything for the feeling of being chosen.
That's the product, isn't it? It's not the object, it's the feeling.
And the economics are unusual. A great luxury brand has what economists would call pricing power. Real pricing power. The cost to make the thing and the price on the tag have very little to do with each other. What you're buying is scarcity, story, and status. And those have enormous margins.
And here's the counterintuitive bit that Arnault understood in his bones. You can't grow a luxury brand by selling more cheaply. The instant it's affordable to everyone, it's desirable to no one. The exclusivity is the asset, so you grow by raising prices and controlling supply, not by discounting.
Which is the exact opposite of every other consumer business on earth.
Precisely the opposite. A normal company panics if demand softens and cuts prices. A luxury house, done right, does the reverse. And LVMH built the discipline to hold that line across dozens of brands.
There's a phrase in the trade, controlling the whole chain, owning the shops, not just the labels. Because if you sell your bag through someone else's discount rack, you've handed away the one thing you're actually selling, which is control of the myth.
So the vertical integration, the owning everything, that's not empire building for its own sake. It's protecting the story from being cheapened.
That's a large part of it, yes. Though I'd be careful. It's also plainly power. Owning the distribution. Owning the media around fashion in some cases. Owning the real estate and the great shopping streets. It's story protection. And it's a moat. Both are true.
A moat with a beautiful drawbridge.
You cannot resist, can you?
I contain multitudes, and all of them like a good metaphor.
Let's talk about the ending, or the not ending. He's in his 70s now, and there's this very deliberate, almost theatrical question of who comes next.
5 children, all of whom have been placed in serious roles across the group, and it's been widely observed, including by the man himself in interviews, that it's a kind of long audition. He restructured the family holding structure to keep control locked within the family for the long term.
People compare it to a certain television show about a media family, and Arnault has waved that comparison away, but you can see why it sticks. 5 heirs, 1 throne, a father who isn't going anywhere.
And is that stability or is that a slow-motion risk? Because family successions in business are famously where empires go to die.
That's the honest tension. On one hand, family control lets you think in decades, not quarters, which suits luxury, where a brand is a 50-year proposition. On the other, you're betting the whole thing on the gene pool, essentially.
Though he's hedged even that, it's not here's the crown, eldest child. It's each of them running real operations, being watched, being tested. It's the portfolio logic applied to his own children.
Oh, that's bleak. He turned parenting into a diversified risk strategy.
I wouldn't put it on a birthday card, but structurally, it's consistent with everything else he's done.
And you know what? I find it strangely coherent as a life. The engineer who looked at a chaotic industry of egos and moods and built a structure that could survive any single one of them, including, eventually, himself.
So, let me pull the thread I came in doubting. I walked in skeptical of the lone genius story. And I want to say plainly, I've shifted. Not all the way to genius, but I no longer think this is just a clever financier who got lucky with pretty companies.
What moved you? I'm curious which piece.
The portfolio point, that the money discipline and the creative daring are the same idea seen from two sides. Building a structure specifically so that art can afford to fail, that's a real insight about how creativity survives inside commerce. I hadn't seen it that way.
That's a generous thing to say out loud, and honestly, it's rarer than it should be. Someone changing their mind mid-conversation.
Well, you two made the case. That's the deal.
And I'd temper it only slightly, to keep us honest. He didn't invent luxury, and he didn't invent the conglomerate. What he did was see, earlier and more clearly than almost anyone, that these dusty old houses were undervalued cultural machines, that heritage was a balance sheet asset nobody was pricing right.
He looked at Dior and Vuitton and saw what a property developer sees in a rundown building on a great street. Fantastic bones, terrible management, wildly underpriced.
The concrete man never left, na?
He never left. It's location, location, location. Except the location is inside your head. The prime real estate is your sense of what makes you special.
And the lasting influence is that the whole industry now works his way. The idea of the big luxury group, a stable of houses, shared muscle, deep pockets, young stars rotated through old names. That's the default model now. His main rival built themselves in response to him. He set the terms of the game everybody else plays.
Which is maybe the truest sign of influence. Not that you won, that everyone else had to become a bit like you to compete.
Can I land us somewhere a touch more complicated, though? Because for all my metaphors, I don't want to leave it as pure admiration.
Please.
There's a real question about what all this does to us. He didn't just build a company. He helped build a world where status is for sale at every price point, where a logo does emotional work that used to be done by, character, community. And that's a fortune built on a certain kind of human longing.
That's fair, and it's not new. Luxury has always traded on longing. What's new is the scale and the science of it, the precision. When one group can shape what beautiful and aspirational mean across dozens of houses and thousands of shops, that's a lot of cultural power in very few hands.
And the labor question sits under it too. The margins we marveled at. Some of that is the myth, yes, but the supply chains behind luxury goods aren't automatically as pristine as the boutiques.
Yeah, a fair caution. The industry as a whole has faced hard questions there, and I'd not wave it away.
So the honest picture is a dazzling one and an uneasy one at the same time. A man who understood desire so well he built the largest fortune on earth out of it, and in doing so taught the whole world to want in his particular way.
And I think that's where I land, having come in ready to shrug him off. He's not a lone genius, and he's not a villain in a cashmere coat. He's something more interesting than either, an engineer of desire who saw value where others saw dust, and paid for it with a certain coldness he never really hid.
Well said. The wolf part was always right there in the nickname. People just like the cashmere so much, they forgot to be nervous.
And they kept buying the coats.
Which, when you think about it, is the entire business in one sentence.
It rather is.
On which perfectly wrapped note, thank you both. I came in doubting and I'm leaving persuaded, and that's the best thing a conversation can do to a person.
A narrative with a handle, all the way down.
That's us.
This episode was generated with AI by Demades.